Our Hit Parade, starring Frank Sinatra.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
And now, Smile a While with Lorenzo Jones and his wife, Belle.
Here's the Manhattan merry-go-round that brings you the bright side of life, that whirls you in music to all the big night spots of New York town, to hear the top songs of the week sung so clearly you can understand every word and sing them yourself.
This is the golden age of radio. I'm Dick Bertel, and tonight we'll take you on another audio excursion back to radio's formative years. You'll hear the programs that made the era golden, and meet people who made those broadcasts a reality.
Now, here's your host, Dick Bertel.
Good evening, and with me once again is radio historian collector Ed Corcoran.
Well, hi, Dick. It's nice to be here again, and we have another famous guest tonight. We have maybe a little bit different guest.
Well, different, Ed, at least in this sense. He was never in radio, although his work certainly has a connection to radio. He built his career in movies as one of Hollywood's greatest and most prolific directors.
I was really surprised he did so many in such a short time.
Well, it wasn't that short. His motion picture career actually spanned some 30 years or so, but he directed some real blockbusters.
And he had overflow audiences all the time, so...
What does that have to do with radio? Well, his films were all adapted for radio on such famous shows as the Campbell Playhouse, the Hallmark Playhouse, and, of course, the Lux Radio Theater.
That's very interesting.
Let's say hello to motion picture director John Cromwell. Mr. Cromwell, I understand you make your home in Wilton, Connecticut.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I told you I was watching TV a couple of weeks ago, and I came across the movie Dead Reckoning, starring Humphrey Bogart and Elizabeth Scott, which you directed. Tell me about that film.
Well, it was sort of an interesting story. Columbia Studio had worked out a contract for Humphrey Bogart with Warner's at some time. And Warner's called Columbia up and said he was available now and they want him. And so Harry Cohn, who was head of Columbia, said, oh yes, we'll take him right away. So Bogart had the privilege of okaying the director and the script. And so they sent him a list of directors, and he picked me out because years before that I had put him on the stage when he was just a lad in his first part. And so we started to work on this story, which I think was pretty bad. I've always hated the picture, but it was fun working with Humphrey. And
I suppose that in light of what you say, it was a bad picture, but watching it as I was on a Sunday afternoon and watching one of my favorite actors, Humphrey Bogart, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, I think that all kudos should be given to Humphrey for that.
The picture that I want to ask you about, produced in 1938, starred Charles Boyer, Hedy Lamarr, and Sigrid Gury, called Algiers.
Yes.
And from this picture, although I understand the line never appeared in the picture, we always hear impersonators doing Charles Boyer doing Take Me to the Casbah. I understand he never said those words in the picture.
Well, I think he said something about the Casbah.
Did he?
It was a very good picture, very good story. Oh, a big French actor at that time.
Jean Gabon.
And one of his most successful pictures. And when I saw it, I was fascinated with it. And I said, well, I'm just silly to try and improve on this. I'm just going to make a remake of this picture. That's all. And that's what I did, because it was fine, a fine story. And I remember one amusing thing that happened about it. When we got through, I met Boyer, and he said, how is it, John? How is it? I said, oh, I think it's pretty good, Charles. But I said, American actors don't know how to play Frenchmen. The cast is very good, I suppose, but they're not like the men in that original company. And he said, well, I'll tell you something that you've forgotten, I think. You know, those actors you saw in that French film, you'd never seen before.
That's true.
And so you thought they were wonderful. And I think he was right, because we had a very good cast, wonderful, and some wonderful acting in it.
Why don't we listen to it, and then maybe you comment on it, Dick, whether you remember this at all.
The makers of Campbell Soup present The Campbell Playhouse. Orson Welles, producer.
Good evening. This is Orson Welles. Tonight we bring you adventure and romance from the motion pictures. And from motion pictures, one of its newest and most colorful personalities, Miss Paulette Goddard. The story, Algiers, which I've adapted from the Walter Wanger production, based on the thrilling French story by Detective Shelby. The setting, the native quarter known as the Kasbah. I read you a description of the Kasbah last week. It belongs in tonight's script again. And take my word for it, it's authentic. Because believe it or not, your humble servant has lived in the Kasbah. Like Shanghai and Marseille, Port Said and Singapore and Chifu and Macao, and all the rest of the wild and wicked cities of the world, where anything can happen and everything does, the Kasbah is just as remarkable as the sound of the word, which is its name, the Kasbah. Look, there before us is Algiers, a modern city. And then suddenly behind that you're in the Kasbah. And from the modern city to the Kasbah, it's only a step. But ladies and gentlemen, when you take that step, you enter another world. A melting pot for all the sins of the earth. 40,000 inhabitants from all over the world. Kabyles, Chinese, Checos, Slavs far from home, and Maltese, and Spaniards, hot-blooded and quick to hate, and women. Women of every age and every shape, women caught in the net of the Kasbah, which rises like a fortress from the sea, colorful, sordid, and dangerous. There isn't just one Kasbah. There are 100, 1,000. And in that labyrinth, Pepe Lemoko is at home. And he is safe there, as long as he stays.
Why you insist on getting off in this uncivilized hole when we might be in Monte Carlo tomorrow meeting the right kind of people?
But I don't, Richard. I don't insist on anything. We'll do whatever you say.
Well, Gabby, which is it to be?
Richard, I really don't care.
Make up your mind, my dear. Do we land in Algiers or do we go on to the Riviera?
Richard, honestly, it doesn't matter.
Do we land in Algiers or do we go on to the Riviera?
I've told you what I'd like to do. I'd like to see Algiers.
Algiers! Last call for Algiers! Last call for Algiers! This way, Paging Commissioner Hilliard! Paging Commissioner Hilliard! Paging Commissioner Hilliard!
What is this? Mr. Hilliard? Yes. Well, Mr. Hilliard, there's a party on the tender, sir, asking for you. Says he's the prefect of police.
Thanks. This way, sir. Tender just coming in.
Oh, all right, then. Have it your own way.
Meaning what?
We'll get off at Algiers.
Richard, I really don't.
Now, let's not talk about it, dear. We're getting off in Algiers.
Algiers! Last call for Algiers! All passengers for Algiers! This way, please. This way,
Commissioner Hilliard?
That's right.
Enchanted to meet you, sir. My name is Louvain, prefect of police for the territory of Algiers.
Glad to meet you. Guess you know why I'm here?
We are very happy, Commissioner, my associates and I, now that you will be able to observe for yourself our local conditions.
Local conditions?
Yes, you see,
What's that got to do with it? Here's a crook whose exploits have made him famous on both sides of the Atlantic, who escaped from New York with 2 years ago with a fortune in jewels.
But local
in the United States, we handle harder cases every day of the week.
It's too bad, Commissioner, that you didn't arrest him before he left the United States.
2 years now he's been hiding here, not a mile from your police station.
We
and
will
what
try
do
and
you do?
explain, Commissioner. Inspector Slimane, He's one of our most experienced men. The Kasbah's his territory.
Kasbah? What's that?
The Kasbah, honored sir, is the present home of Pepe Lamoko.
Pepe Lamoko?
That's what he is called in the Kasbah.
What's been the matter? Can't you find him?
Find him. Honored sir, I see him every day.
What?
Sometimes I have the honor of taking lunch with him.
Lunch?
Sometimes dinner.
You're sure, Inspector, that you're not too lazy to arrest this man?
I am merely careful.
Which means looking after your own skin.
It is the only skin I have.
Inspector Levine, I'd like you to put 20 men at my disposal, the best men you've got.
As you wish. You mean, honored sir, you propose to raid the Kasbah?
You think it can't be done?
Oh, no, not at all. It can be done very easily, Commissioner. And you will find it a most instructive experience.
A portion of the classic motion picture Algiers, directed by John Cromwell, our guest tonight on the Golden Age of Radio. It was beautifully done, Ed.
Yes, Dick. The whole production was very lavish and never been duplicated.
Let's talk about some of your outstanding pictures, and they really are outstanding. I'll mention some of them later, but I do want to go back to your introduction to Hollywood, which was about 1928. You had been a director in New York on Broadway for a number of years. You were working for William A. Brady. And then you produced a play or directed a play called The Racket.
No, I played in it.
You played in it?
Yeah.
And this was the very first, the forerunner, I guess you might say, of the Gangster series.
That's right.
And it was tremendously successful.
Very successful. And we were playing it in Los Angeles when Paramount, everybody in Los Angeles and Hollywood then were terribly conscious. They knew that something was going on, but sound hadn't broken to become a fact. So everybody was thinking in terms of what it would be. They were sure it was going to be a fact. But so that everybody, studio, were looking for directors from New York who had worked with dialogue, you see. There's a character in Eugene O'Neill's play called Anna Christie, the old sea captain, and he has this feeling about the sea, and he keeps on talking about Old Devil Sea. Well, in these days in Hollywood, it was Old Devil dialogue. They were scared to death of it. They didn't know what. Everybody was afraid that their careers were over unless they could make good with dialogue, whether they were a writer or an actor or a director. And everybody was hanging back. And when I went out there, I finally got doing this first little picture with Nancy Carroll and Charlie Rogers. What's his name?
Buddy Rogers.
Buddy Rogers. And they said, now, John, we think it'd be a good idea if you go in with a co-director. And I said, that's fine. Well, we got one, Eddie Sutherland, a very successful comedy director then. And I said, that is all, I'm for that. But I said, there's only one thing that I would tell you from my experience. Two people can't direct a picture. And when we're on the set, I'm afraid I'll have to insist that I'm the director. Well, Eddie was only too happy to do this because he was scared to death and he wanted to see what you did with dialogue and what effect it would have on shooting. And I was very anxious because I wanted to learn from him what you do with the camera, you see. But I knew this to be a fact, so that they gave in, and he was very nice. We did two pictures together, and under the happiest circumstances, we worked marvelously together.
Most of the directors in New York at this time felt that shooting a motion picture was simply shooting a stage play.
That's right. Put a camera up and produce the play in front of them.
And you had perhaps some other thoughts on the subject, and so you went out to observe.
I don't know what ever prompted me, but I do have a curious turn of mind. That is, I'm curious about anything new that I encounter. And I was curious about this, and curious enough to kind of reason out that was too simple an explanation. something went on in that little black box they had up there that you had to find out about. So I insisted on going into the cutting department for 3 months, and I found what you did with this stuff, this that you cut off there and put together and then cut a piece here. And this is it. I mean, pictures are made in the cutting room, really.
I suppose that's true.
Yeah.
Well, now, this was a dilemma for the studios, too, 1928, when you went out there, because they had a number of pictures on the shelf which were silent. And this represented thousands and thousands of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
I suppose.
Oh, yes. A picture has to stay, after it's finished, stays on the shelf, as they call it, for about from 6 to 8 months before it's released. So, and there is one time in the year when they've got a shelf full of negatives. Well, it was just at that time when sound came in, and they had to make the shift from sound. Now, the minute they advertised sound to the public was not going to be any further interest in silent pictures.
Right.
So this would wipe out millions and millions of dollars. So figuring out what to do in that situation was really something.
What did they come up with?
Well, they finally introduced sound effects. Usually pictures in those days were 10 reels. And the first 9 reels were sound effects, automobile horns, every sound that they could get in, they got in, you see. But still no dialogue. And they came to the last reel. Now, the reason for that was they couldn't go and get the actors and redo the whole picture because that would be too expensive. But they could redo the last reel or last half reel, say, and get the actors, put sets up and redo the in terms of dialogue, which they did. So they could advertise that picture then as this new sound sensation. Garbo talks.
I think the public was had at that point.
Just a bit.
You were talking earlier about the cumbersome cameras and the primitive equipment with which you had to work. I'd like to talk with you about those early sound cameras. They were actually housed, weren't they?
I know, but you see, this was another crux of the situation, was how they would handle the equipment, because they used carbon lights. Well, in silent pictures, you don't care how much hissing and sound there is of carbon lights. Well, they had to throw out all the carbon lights because they couldn't have any hissing and stuff like that, so they all had to be incandescent. That was just one small part of it. The other was that a silent camera, or a camera for silent pictures, I should say, makes about as much noise as a large sewing machine. And so that was out. Couldn't do that. Now, they had to use those. It takes a long time to design a camera and a housing. That took them, I don't remember, I'll make a rough guess, a year and a half to get it really down. So they had to think up something. So they made a huge box with about 1 foot of sound material around it to let 3 men, the camera crew, in. The operator and his assistant and another man, and with a big heavy door on it. And these things weighed, 3/4 of a ton. It took about 6 men to shove them around. They were on rollers. And you had to shoot through glass, of course, and the camera couldn't move. It was absolutely straight, so you had to have one for one shot, and one over here on this side for another shot, and then one over here on this side for another shot, you see, and they all shot at once.
So actually the director was hampered too in his movement of the camera.
He had to devise his business so that at the right time he had to sort of pre-cut the picture in his mind so that he was sure he would have it covered the way he wanted to. Well, now that lasted, I'm making a guess now because I can't remember. in detail, but I should say close to a year those things went on. In the meantime, they were all working on housings. And I remember I moved from Paramount to RKO, and I got over there, and they had a very inventive guy over there, a cameraman that I had worked with later, and he had come up with this housing that he had. It was pretty crude and pretty heavy to operate, but it was the camera itself on a tripod, so it could move around, and it had some mobility. Well, then it just went on improving in every way, the sound and the camera and the lights. In about a year and a half, 2 years, they had what do they call these carbon lights that they could control.
But now, what I was surprised to learn was that in 1928, pictures were in a bad way financially. People just weren't buying pictures anymore, and it was at this time that Western Electric, who produced the microphones and the sound equipment for the film studios, thought that perhaps they might take over the film industry.
Well, they did, because they controlled the patents, and you had to get your equipment and everything through them. And they made it such a great hocus pocus about this great mystery and how you worked it and all. So they must have had ideas in their minds that through this they could might step in and find themselves owning the whole picture business, because but that soon wore off. There were too many loopholes for them to control.
And I suppose that the director had to work very closely with the sound man. He was king at that time in those early days.
Yes, and what you did was at first rather dare them or shame them into taking chances. See, they didn't want to be, they had men that were over them back there that said, how dare you allow this bad sound to come in here? We're just starting and we want nothing but perfection. So they wouldn't do a thing. They were protecting themselves all over the place. And you had to kind of shame them into taking a chance, doing something. The minute you did that, of course, and they were successful, why then they were out looking for difficulties to solve.
Tell me about the difficulty that you presented to them when you wanted to do a truck shot down a corridor.
Oh, well, we were doing, this was a picture called, of a play, of a very successful play in New York called Burlesque, which we called, of all things, The Dance of Life, which is another funny story. But I had a shot of the two people. It was a story of a burlesque troupe, and the man and the woman did a number on the stage, and they came off the stage, went down the stairs, and down this long hall to their dressing rooms, playing a choral scene. And I wanted it to happen just that way. Well, we got out into this hall, and it was supposed to be an old church that had been made over into a burlesque theater, see? And it had these series of beams across the top, about every 8 feet. And so the sound man says, you can't get it up, because they were low enough so they couldn't hide the mic, see, going in front of the camera. So I said, well, now there must be a way to do this. And after lunch, you come back and tell me you got it solved, you see. Well, after lunch, they came back and said, we want to try it. What they did was to corral 6 or 8 mics, one for each of these spaces between the beams. And they had an operator up there, and he had the mic on a fishpole. And he swung over in front of the camera and passed right on to the next man and right down the line. And then we had another one on that picture that was a first too, I'm sure. They were playing a scene in a rough kind of burlesque house, and some drunk in the audience began to harass the man, you see, and he couldn't stand it any longer, and he answered him back, and they got into a fight. And the girl keeps on singing, see? So I wanted to record this. And they said, oh, no, we don't do the things that way, Mr. Cromwell. We will take separate tracks, and we'll do what then was called dubbing, one on top of the other, you see, mix them. And I said, no, let's try and do it right on the set. Now, come on. And we did it, and did it most successfully, so that we had both tracks, the girls singing and this fight going on, all on one track. It was supposed to be what a sensation.
Let's talk about some of the marvelous pictures that you've directed over the years. In the early 30s, I don't suppose that many people would remember the great films that you were associated with, but one of them was Tom Sawyer with Jackie Coogan and Mitzi Green, and somewhere I've seen that picture. I don't know where. I don't think it's appeared on TV.
No, I don't think so.
No. And then we move up to, I think, perhaps one of the greatest pictures you've done, 1934, Betty Davis and Leslie Howard in Of Human Bondage.
Yes.
And I discovered that this picture, which has been remade twice, was a financial failure. Why?
Well, the story, if you remember it, was about a most sensitive young man who had, and this was supposed to be autobiographical on Mom's part to a degree. He had a club foot, not very bad, but enough to have a limp and all, and he was very conscious of this. And he fell in love with this little gal who was a waitress in a little restaurant in London. And he feels sorry for her and realizes she was a very common little girl that never had any advantages at all, and full of self-defenses. And so he took care of her. Finally realized what she was, but he couldn't leave her or throw her out or anything. And so he just took dreadful things that she did to him, to such a degree that the audience had no sympathy for him at all.
Mm-hmm.
This was supposed to be a hero, mind you. So they just turned thumbs down. They wouldn't have it. And I know that's what it was eventually, because I think the remakes were much more successful than the original picture.
Let's talk about The Prisoner of Zenda. You directed this one in 1937. Ronald Colman, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and Madeline Carroll.
That's right.
And I guess this one has been released for television. I'm sure it has.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
Well, my mind always runs to the funny stories.
Well, that's exactly what I want to hear about.
Coleman had what we call in pictures a bad side. It wasn't very bad, but he was in the habit of being photographed from one side where you had any choice at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so this went with him in any studio he went to. They just absorbed this. You knew it, you see, so the director would plan all his scenes where he could with Coleman in this position where his good side was toward the camera, two-shot, two
mm-hmm.
people facing each other. And Madeline Carroll, who was a lovely, lovely girl, beautiful, but she was all the young women. She was the young leading woman then, and she was fighting for her position. And she saw this going on, and she suddenly got an idea. Came to me and said, I have a very bad side. I can't. And I said, oh, really? I said, yes. And unfortunately for her, she picked out the wrong side. She picked out the same side as Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, Madeline, will you tell me how I can shoot a two-shot? And this is Coleman's good side, and your good side is on the same side? Can't be done. So I went to my cameraman, and it was one of the best, James Wong Howe,
mm-hmm.
and I said, she says she's got a bad side. He said, You stand her on her head. She's got a fault. Photograph her from any direction. So I said, sorry, Madeline was out, and she got huffy and she didn't talk to me the rest of the picture.
Oh, that's a good story.
Well, that's something we never knew, Dick.
Ed, do you happen to have The Prisoner of Zenda in your collection?
Yes, one of my favorite shows, and I think when you hear the excerpt, you'll agree it lived up to the advanced billing as far as production is concerned, Dick.
Lux presents Hollywood. The Lux Radio Theater comes to you with the good wishes of the makers of Lux Flakes. And now, here's the producer of the Lux Radio Theater. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cecil B. DeMille. Greetings from Hollywood, ladies and gentlemen. Our curtain's rising now, and the Lux Radio Theater brings you The Prisoner of Zenda, starring Ronald Colman, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and Benita Hume. A lonely mountain stream, somewhere in the woods of Middle Europe. To an aged oak near the edge of the stream is nailed a tattered placard, which reads, Province of Zenda Fishing Preserve, trespassing forbidden, by order of His Majesty the King. Just below the sign, stretched out full length on the grassy bank, is a young Englishman. His head is pillowed on a fishing creel. His rod lies unheeded by his side. He's deep in sleep, when two men in hunting costume come from the woods and stand over him. They gaze at him for a moment, and then turn to each other in astonishment.
It's unbelievable. Look at him.
There is a resemblance, isn't there?
Resemblance. Look at the nose, the chin. Shave him and he'd be the king.
He isn't the king, is he? I mean, I didn't have that much to drink last night.
Oh, don't be a fool. The king's hunting over the ridge. Wake the man up.
Say, there, you. Wake up. Wake up.
Oh, your pardon, gentlemen. Good morning. Anything the matter?
May I ask your name, please?
Well, since you've taken the first step in the acquaintance, gentlemen, suppose you give me a lead in the matter of names.
This is Colonel Zapt, and I'm Fritz von Taulenheim. We are both in the service of His Majesty the King.
How do you do? I am Rudolph Rassendyll, traveling from England, not so long ago in the service of Her Majesty the Queen.
Rassendyll. Rassendyll. By heaven, I knew there was some reason for it.
Fritz! Zapt! Where are you?
Here, Your Majesty.
Where? Confound it, I thought I'd lost you. Why didn't... Oh. Who's this?
He's by way of being a relative of yours, sire.
A relative? I don't understand. It is something for which you cannot entirely blame me, Your Majesty. Oh, then who is to blame? If I may hazard a guess, Your Majesty, I would say that the blame might lie equally between your great-great-great-grandfather Rudolph and my great-great-great-grandmother Amelia. What?
Right, by heaven. The man's a Rassendyll from England, sire.
Well met, cousin. Forgive me if I was unduly surprised. It's too early in the day for a man to see double, eh, Fritz? What are you doing here, cousin? I must admit, sire, that I may have been guilty of somewhat the same offense as our mutual ancestor. Oh, what was that? Fishing in forbidden waters. Oh, that was good. That's good. The man has wit, Zapt. Well, what are you saying, cousin? What are your plans? I am at the inn, sire, and I have no plans other than to fish. Oh, you must come to my coronation tomorrow. I'd give 1,000 crowns for the sight of Brother Michael's face when he sees the pair of us. But of course you don't know my dear Brother Michael. I'm afraid, sire, I haven't that honor. We must arrange that he enjoy that honor, eh, Fritz? By the way, Rassendyll, what name did they give you? The same as Your Majesty's. Ha ha. That shows they weren't ashamed of us, Rudolph. Thank you, sire. You must leave your quarters at the inn at once. Come to my hunting lodge, and tonight we'll dine you right royally.
I'll see to that, sire.
We'd planned on retiring early tonight, Your Majesty.
What? With a newfound cousin for a guest? Not a bit of it. Zapt, it's a night for celebration. Come on. Wine, Joseph, more wine.
Yes, Your Majesty, at once.
And now, Cousin Rudolph, I propose another toast. Here, here.
A toast.
To our ancestor, that scandalous rogue Rudolph II. Here, here. Now, let's see. Who'll be next? Your brother Michael, perhaps? Michael, why waste good wine? I'll tell you a secret about my brother Michael. He doesn't love me. No. Michael thinks the world's all wrong. He thinks he ought to be me, and I ought to be he. Let's forget about Michael. Let's drink a toast to Cousin Flavia, soon to be my bride and queen. Here. It's a shame you can't meet the princess. At least I'm told it's a shame. I haven't seen her for years. She and I didn't get on very well then. Oh, perhaps we shall now. I should certainly hope so, sire, if you're going to marry her. They say she's too good for me. Probably is. You know what they say about me, don't you? I drink too much. I imagine that you are well able to take care of yourself on that score, Your Majesty. You're right, cousin. I can take care of myself. The devil take it, why is there no more wine? Joseph! Wine.
Coming.
Your Majesty, please.
Perhaps we rubbed his hands.
Your Majesty. No use, Fred.
Hello. Quite an evening, wasn't it? What's the matter with the king?
Joseph found him on the floor this morning.
On the floor? Is he still asleep?
Very much so. You didn't drink any of this last bottle, did you?
No, not that I know of.
No, I think you'd know if you had.
Why? Was it drugged?
It was.
But how? Why? Who did it?
Who else but Michael?
Who else?
Michael. His brother?
Half-brother. Michael's mother wasn't exactly acceptable in court circles.
But the coronation.
There isn't going to be a coronation.
But this is fantastic. Impossible. What's in Michael's mind?
In Michael's mind? Only the throne and the Princess Flavia.
Oh, and has he a chance?
He has now. Michael is waiting in Strelsau now with Rupert of Hentzau. Half the army already on his side, and half the people, too. It's the moment he's been waiting for, planning for, counting on the king's weaknesses, such as they are.
And the coronation can't be postponed, eh?
If he's not crowned today, he'll never be crowned. He must be there for the ceremony. Yes. That's all that would be necessary. The ceremony.
What's the matter? What are you staring at?
Englishman, I'm much older than you. As a man grows old, he comes to believe in fate. Fate sent you here. Fate sends you now to Strelsau to be crowned king.
What?
Sounds mad, doesn't it? But without your beard, I'd wager you could deceive your own brother.
You must be out of your mind.
Yes, it's a risk against a certainty.
My dear Colonel, I came here on a fishing trip. I like to fish. I am a simple Englishman. I couldn't begin to act like a king even if I tried. I wouldn't deceive anybody.
What are you laughing at?
I was just thinking it would be a scene, wouldn't it? The cathedral crowded to the doors and the organ booming. I kneel to be crowned. Yes, and then your friend Michael steps forward and shouts, "Hey, this isn't the king, this is an Englishman named Rudolph Rassendyll." Oh, no, I'm afraid not, gentlemen.
Then Black Michael sits tonight on the throne, and the king lies in prison. Or his grave.
His grave?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Well, I can't. After all, it would only be for today, wouldn't it?
Tonight you shall be safely across the border.
King for a day. And what would it mean if I fail?
Your life. And mine. And Fritz's here.
All I'd have to do is to shave. Confound it, I'd become awfully fond of this beard.
Then you'll do it?
Yes, may heaven help the three of us.
An excerpt from The Prisoner of Zenda on the Lux Radio Theater, going back to June the 5th, 1939. A film directed by our guest tonight, John Cromwell. I noticed, Mr. Cromwell, that there were a lot of radio actors playing secondary roles.
They sounded better than the original people who spoke the lines.
Yeah, that's right.
Your favorite picture is one that I saw at the Radio City Music Hall when it was first released in 1940, Abe Lincoln in Illinois, with Raymond Massey, Ruth Gordon, and Gene Lockhart. And again, you amazed me when you told me that this picture was not financially successful.
Well, people don't think of that nowadays, because now you can have a picture that makes a success on its own. I mean, the story or the subject or whatever, and it doesn't need these Hollywood star names. It's true that there are not a great many of them, but it can be done. It has been done. In those days, it was absolutely impossible. You had, if you didn't have a name, you might as well not have done the picture.
And Raymond Massey at that time was not that well established?
Oh, no. He was a big star in New York from this performance, if nothing else. But that's not the country.
From what standpoint is Abe Lincoln your favorite picture?
Oh, I think the story. I was enormously interested in the subject and did great research of Lincoln himself. And then we had a marvelous script, and that always makes a great difference. It really told the story that Sherwood had written, and I think the picture, in many ways, much better than the play, because it's fuller, more complete.
Anna and the King of Siam, produced by Fox in 1946, and you directed it with Irene Dunn and Rex Harrison. And this, of course, was the forerunner of The King and I.
I went to Fox to do another picture, actually, and then something came up, and I was shifted from that to Anna and the King of Siam. And I was very grateful, because it was a book. It was a sort of secondary bestseller at the time. And actually, the studio had no great interest in this story per se, but it was the habit of studios in those days. If something was a bestseller of any proportion, buy it up if you can get it cheap enough and put it on the shelf so nobody else can make it. Well, they had a producer at Fox then that I had done 2 or 3 pictures with at Paramount, named Hylton, and he was a very intelligent and a very man with great taste, and only would do good pictures. He had a wonderful list of pictures, credits to his name. And so they would only have him make maybe 2 or 3 pictures a year, and he was due to make a picture, and they told him to go out and find one, and he looked through their shelves, and he found this story, and he was crazy to do it. And my funny story about this is, as I say, the studio was not really interested in this picture, this story, because to them it was what you might call an olive. I use that term because usually people have to cultivate the taste for olives, and so it has to be cultivated. And this picture was a story that you had to cultivate a liking to, because they just didn't understand it in terms of audiences and its appeal. So the script we turned out was very faithful to the book, and the quality that we were trying to get between the king and Anna, which was a wonderful, interesting relationship, was one of that would suggest that they behaved exactly like married people. They fought, they quarreled, they, showed great respect for each other. He was terribly impressed with this Caucasian woman, one of the first he'd ever met, who had a mind. His women were all concubines, but here was a woman who thought and could do things, and she was terribly impressed because he was a king who really wanted to help his country and develop it, and he was fascinated, oddly enough, with Lincoln. He sent Lincoln a letter and offered him, in the war, for the war effort, offered him 24 elephants that he's sure he would find very useful to behind the lines. We got reactions to this script, but Hylton, who was the producer, was a man that they didn't fool much with, and because he was very independent, and so they figured out some way to. They thought they'd get at me because they had their great worry about the story was there no love interest. And they were trying to figure out how they could get love interest between the king and Anna. Well, it was perfectly ridiculous. It didn't fit the story. It wasn't even suggested in the story. The story had to stand on its novelty and its situations and all. But they had, George Jessel was then a producer at Fox. And so they were talking it over, I think, in the dining room one day, and they said, maybe we can get it through Cromwell and get at him. George, you used to know him back in New York, so George said, oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I don't know that we had ever met, but people from New York who got met in Hollywood and known each other always assumed that, of course, they had been great pals. So he got me one day as I was going toward my office, and he said, can I come in and talk to you about this? Wonderful script you got, wonderful. It's going to be a wonderful picture. And I said, sure, George, come in. So he said, look, don't you think you ought to have some kind of love interest in this picture? Couldn't it? And I said, no, George, I don't think you can do that. You see, the thing we have worked for is to get a feeling that these two people behave toward each other as husband and wife, really, without realizing it. But as for what you call love interest, and that's what it would mean, you can't put it in the story. This is a different story. So we got all through, and we cut the picture with Mr. Zanuck, and you usually have a difficult time if you got a picture that you love and are trying to keep in its entirety, because he was nibbling at things that we felt affected the story. Well, we got through it pretty well, and the picture was sent on to New York, and you could tell from the attitude of the studio that they weren't terribly impressed. They thought, oh, it's a nice picture to look at, but it'll be an awful flop at the box office. Well, the picture went to New York. They ran it in the front office, and they went overboard about it. They thought it was just marvelous. So these great telegrams came out, you see, and my contract was about over, and they hadn't taken up the option and got all these telegrams, and they immediately approached my agent. And he came to me, and I said, no, I think it's time for them to wake up a little. They thought I was so good. Why, they knew that before the picture came out. Now it's simply because the front office likes the picture. So we didn't do anything about it. But the picture was quite a big success.
Tonight from Hollywood, the makers of Hallmark greeting cards bring you Deborah Carr in Margaret Landon's Anna and the King of Siam on the Hallmark Playhouse. Each week, Hallmark will bring you Hollywood's greatest stars in outstanding stories chosen by one of the world's best-known authors, the distinguished novelist, Mr. James Hylton.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is James Hylton. To view a story that for charm and delicacy must rank high among the tales of recent years. It's by Margaret Landon. And if I were asked what it's about, I could only tell you it's about, well, Anna and the King of Siam. In fact, it's one of the few titles nowadays that really do mean what they say. In her book, Miss Landon has been able to combine her own personal knowledge of the country with the rather wonderful career of the real-life Anna, who actually lived in Siam almost 90 years ago. I think you'll enjoy this story, which so artfully combines the wisdom of the Orient with the practicality of a very delightful schoolma'am. And for the school, more delightful than Deborah Carr, that lovely actress who has endeared herself to millions on both sides of the Atlantic.
The year is 1862. I am a widow, 28 years old, with 2 children, a boy and a girl. I am about to embark on a strange adventure, which I will set down upon these pages as it unfolds. It begins with a letter which I received today from the King of Siam.
Madam, we are in good pleasure and satisfaction in heart that you are in willingness to undertake the education of our beloved royal children. We beg to invite you to our royal palace to do your best endeavorment upon us and our children. We shall expect to see you here on return of Siamese steamer G.A.O.R.
The letter arrived on February 26th. I arranged for my daughter to stay with friends in Shanghai. And a short time later, my son and I and our 2 servants were on the G.A.O.R, bound for Siam. The ship moved up a river and into the Arabian Nights. We saw houses thatched with palms and the spires and turrets of castles. And by the time it was dark, we were at anchor. My small household waited uncertainly on deck with me. And finally, out of the shadows flashed a long gondola, beautifully carved like a dragon, with torches reflected upon the rhythmic dip of white paddles. A Siamese official mounted the side of the G.A.O.R and came up to me.
Good evening, sir.
Are you speaking to me?
But of course. Good evening, sir. Are you the lady who is to teach the royal family?
I am.
Where is your husband?
My husband is dead.
Then where will you go in the evenings?
No, really, that is none of your affair.
As you please. Have you friends in Bangkok?
I know no one in Bangkok at all.
What will you do? Where will you sleep tonight?
I don't know. I am a stranger here, but I understood from His Majesty's letter that a residence would be provided for me on my arrival.
His Majesty cannot remember everything. You can go wherever you like.
I beg your Majesty to remember that in your gracious letter, you promised me a residence adjoining the palace, not within it.
I do not know what I have promised, and I do not know former condition. I do not know anything but you are my servant, and it is my pleasure that you live in the palace, and you shall obey.
Your Majesty has perhaps forgotten that I am not a servant, but a governess. I am prepared to obey all your Majesty's commands within the obligation of my duty to your family. But beyond that, I can promise no obedience.
You shall live in the palace! You shall live in the palace!
I will not.
You will live in the palace! We will discuss this again when you are not so excited. You shall commence royal school in our pavilion Thursday next. That is the best day for such undertaking in the estimation of our astrologers. You may go, sir.
Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. Good day, Your Majesty.
You directed films through 1961. Your last picture was A Matter of Morals with Britt Nielsen and Pat O'Neill. So that spans about 32 years, I guess, in Hollywood.
I guess so.
Well, it's been great after all these years.
I want to thank you very much, John Cromwell, for being my guest.
Well, it was a great pleasure, I'm sure.
And until next time, this is Dick Bertel.
This is Ed Corcoran.
Good night.
Don't despair, use your head, save your hair, use Dick's shampoo.
The Golden Age of Radio was produced by Bob Shirago and Dick Bertel.
Rinse so white and rinse so bright.
Broadcasting from New York City, Jack Benny with Mary Livingston, Phil Harris, Rochester, Dennis Day, and filling in.
A dancing program from the Paradise Restaurant.